Hello everyone, welcome to Mr. Noctory today. We will travel back to the Ice Age 80,000 years ago. The cold is so intense that even your nostrils freeze, and Neanderthals, still bare-skinned, sit grinding stones as if nothing's happening. Neanderthals, not dumb cavemen, but the strongest creatures to ever exist without a gym membership. Every day is leg day, arm day, survival day. Chopping wood, skinning animals, climbing mountains, swimming rivers, building shelters and hunting. Neanderthals didn't diet. They ate like warriors. Raw meat, bone marrow, wild fruits. Their brains were larger than modern humans. Why? Before we begin, if you find this a pleasant place to shelter on a late night, please like and subscribe, but only if you truly want to. It's like the rule in ancient taverns. You only join when you need quiet. And you know what I love most? Seeing the comments section, finding out where you're from and what time it is for you. Whether you're in New York or Norway, 1 a.m. or 5 a.m., you're here, and I see you. Now dim the lights, turn on a fan if you have one. Not because it's hot, but for the soft hum. Turn off the lights, pull the blanket up to your chest. Now imagine you've just been transported 80,000 years back in time. Right after you had a late night Netflix binge. Only this time, you're not waking up in the middle of your living room surrounded by snacks and wrappers. You're in the Ice Age. No car horns, no LED lights. Just snow falling in a whiteout, winds cutting like razors, and your breath freezing solid the moment you exhale for the second time. You open your eyes. Your skin feels raw from the cold. Your toes have no feeling and your heart is pounding like a hamster in a boxing ring. The first scent you catch is not morning coffee, but the smell of wet animal fur smoke from an almost dead fire and a faint, musty scent of dry blood mixed with cold mud. You hear something scratching from afar. It could be the claws of a creature with teeth, or just the wind whistling through dry tree branches. You can't tell, and when you try to breathe deeply, your lungs feel dry like you're inhaling chunks of crushed ice. This air isn't for relaxation, it's for survival. You try to lift yourself from the pile of decaying leaves, and then you see it. A creature standing a few meters away. Shoulders as wide as a table, a neck like a drum. Skin covering muscle, muscle covering bone, and bone wrapped in survival. Wearing nothing but a piece of animal skin wrapped around its waist. Hair wild like dried grass and eyes. Deep-set eyes staring at you like you're prey, or maybe just an idiot who got lost from the 21st century. It doesn't speak. It just sniffs, nods, as if greeting you like you've just joined the "we've stepped in elephant poop but still survived" club. Welcome. You're standing face to face with a Neanderthal. Don't call it a caveman. Don't call it a brute. And please don't think it just screamed and cracked rocks over its head like in cartoons. It's the lost ancestor of today's gym bros. A biological machine designed for survival in freezing cold. Without pre-workout, without a squat rack, and without any live streamers showcasing how it can lift 100-kilogram rocks to build a shelter. And here you are, the one who eats canned tuna salad, the one who gets cold just stepping out of the car, the one who blocks the whole gym for forgetting a towel. And yet, you're standing here, in a land where every square meter is a survival exam, where every gust of wind is a slap to your ego. To your left, fresh deer tracks. To your right, a cave dark, damp, and with the sounds of a bear snoring. Ahead of you, the Neanderthal snapping a tree branch with his bare hands, then picking up a sharp rock. And strangely, you're not scared. All you feel is one thing. He was born to live here. You are not. He doesn't shiver. He doesn't pant. He doesn't ask, "Where's my phone?" or "What's the Wi-Fi password?" He just lives, in silence and cold, with every step made by a creature that's already braved snowstorms, wolf packs, broken bones, and still stands tall. And in that moment, as you shiver like a twig in a sea of white, you realize we're not talking about fantasy. We're talking about a real historical era, defined by layers of earth carbon dating and bones that healed from fractures. About 80,000 years ago, during the last ice age, Europe was covered in hundreds of meters of ice. Neanderthals weren't human failures. They had complex stone tools, knew how to make fire, could communicate with signs and basic sounds. And, most remarkably, they buried their dead. You modern humans aren't the first to show compassion. They did it long before you. Some caves like Shanidar in Iraq and La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France have Neanderthal remains buried with flower pollen. Evidence of early burial rituals. You might be trembling in front of this Neanderthal, but biologically, he's no less than you. In fact, his muscle mass, bone density, and cold resistance far exceed yours. You've only won this game of survival because of lucky evolution and a few boosts from the 4G civilization. Maybe to understand yourself better, you need to understand the one who came before you, not through books, but through flesh, bone, cold, and breath. We'll start from here, from the moment you're still shivering and he's grinding a stone. At the point when the world has only two beings. One is you, the newcomer. The other is him, the Ice Age gym bro. He doesn't smile, because here the muscles in the face aren't for smiling. They're for keeping warmth as the icy wind cuts into your cheekbones like a cold surgical knife. You sit there observing the Neanderthal in front of you, like you're using an ancient medical scanner to analyze every muscle fiber, every tendon joint, and every layer of fat that retains heat. Your eyes zoom in on the veins popping out on his forearms like the topography of a newly discovered continent. You see, the Achilles tendon thick like a rope tying a boat, his calves as tight as drum skins, his shoulder blades moving like a miniature catapult mechanism. You think to yourself, if Google had a body map Ice Age edition, this would be the #1 result. It's like watching an ancient bodybuilder, except there's no oil, no spotlight, and no one shouting, "You got this, bro." He's cutting meat off a rabbit with a stone, his forearm bulging as if he'd just bench pressed in a snowstorm. Every movement is deliberate, no extra motion. It's as if this body was forged not in a gym, but under the pressure of survival hunger, cold, and real pain. You wonder, why is he so strong? Why are his shoulders so broad? Why does he look like he could carry you and 2 mammoths through the forest? The answer comes from bones, from archaeology, from the remains found in La Ferracie, Shanidar, Gibraltar. Neanderthal bone samples show an undeniable truth. They were shorter than modern humans, around 5'3" to 5'5" on average, but their chest and lung cavity were 20% larger. So if you're a scooter, they're a pickup truck with a massive gas tank. For example, the La Ferracie 1 skeleton, a famous male Neanderthal, shows a large skull, a wide pelvis, and forearms short, but incredibly thick. Amud 1, found in Israel, is considered to be the tallest Neanderthal ever recorded, almost 5'11". But what left anthropologists stunned wasn't their height. It was the body mass to limb ratio, almost optimized for strength. Researchers analyzed Neanderthal forearm bones and realized they had higher bone density, narrower marrow cavities, and superior muscle junctions. In simpler terms, if you're a MacBook Air, he's an industrial concrete grinder powered by flesh. His shoulders are broad, not for aesthetics, but to balance when climbing cliffs. His chest is thick, not for flaunting, but to protect his lungs when crushed by snow. His hands are large, not for selfies, but for throwing rocks, hurling spears, and punching bears if necessary. You start feeling embarrassed about that protein shake you have every morning. He eats tree roots, raw meat, and animal fat, and still survives an 8-month winter. And don't forget, Neanderthals had larger skulls than modern humans. Not because they were smarter, but because their brains were used more for processing bodily signals, movement, and reflexes. Like a map of muscles and nerves. They could throw a 2-meter-long spear with the precision of a catapult from 20 meters away in the middle of a snowstorm while hungry. You start to question the entire definition of civilization. You think about your gym membership, your 5 a.m. Pilates class. You were once proud of holding a plank for 2 minutes. He was born planking on snow. Just the sound of the wind whipping through the cave's opening and the crackling pop of the ice from the night before melting near the coal stove. 7 a.m, he pees you fetch water. The first trip, you slip and bruise your ass on the cold rocks. The second trip, you manage half a bucket and your wrist is shaking like you just tried lifting too much at the gym without warming up. 9 a.m, a beehive. The tree is being hacked. You balance yourself like you're on a tightrope. He throws stones to get the bees to fly out. You realize this is the cardio portion that was never warned about. 11 a.m, you crawl with him down into a deep rock crevice. The moss is damp and there might be snakes. Every time you touch the rocks, you feel your hands slowly lose feeling. That's just half of the morning and you've already burned more calories than last week combined. And the day is just beginning. No alarms, just the howling wind cutting through the rocks and the sound of dry bones dropping from the ceiling of the cave. Because the ice rats are cleaning out their old nests. He, your Neanderthal, jumps up without needing to stretch. No yoga, no morning meditation. He pees in the snow, shakes his hands like he's just handling the past. Then he grabs a rock, picks up his spear straps on his basket, and walks like you've just hit the start full body training insane difficulty button. In this world, every activity is a workout. Carrying firewood, deadlift chopping meat, battle rope shoveling snow out of the cave entrance, hit cardio, climbing icy mountains to find a beehive, parkour with a deadly fall if you slip. There's no such thing as going to work out, because everything is about living or dying. He just looks at you, then the basket, then the sky, and walks away. The message is clear. Work out to live. Don't work out, you die. You return to the cave collapse on the ground, your heart pounding like a war drum. He's still poking embers and scraping dried meat off bones with his darkened fingernails. No smartwatch, no step count, no calorie counting. Yet your body feels forged from steel and willpower. You realize you're not vacationing in the prehistoric era. You've been handed a survival training ticket no one asked for your opinion. Every day here is one long, full body. No part spared. Workout. from your legs, arms, abs, nerves, to your will to survive. And the strangest thing is, you start to get used to it. The pain from the morning turns into warmth by evening. The tight calves become the sensation of "I'm still alive." He doesn't say, "Congrats on finishing workout day 3. He simply hands you a stone to prop your feet up while you sleep. You smile, because that's how love works here. You watch the Neanderthal carry half a reindeer over his shoulder, as if it's just a heavy sports backpack. No heavy breathing, no groans. Just the sound of bones cracking, not from the meat, but from you. And you wonder, what does he eat to be that strong? Does he have whey protein that tastes like jerky? Does he have chia seeds, granola, or pre-workout mixed with honey? No. He eats anything still warm and not already chewed by the wild animals. In the Ice Age, the menu rotated with the seasons, not because of variety, but because it was mandatory. Summer, grilled insects, stream fish, wild berries, if the birds didn't get them first, and roots that can be dug up with bare hands. Autumn, dried meat from the late season hunts, bare fat stored in caves, a type of protein bar, not for the faint of heart. Winter, meat frozen solid marrow stored cold, and if things got desperate, scraped animal hides boiled to soften. Some days, breakfast is fish buried in the snow from 3 weeks ago. Lunch is half-eaten marten heart. Dinner is mystery mushrooms, maybe a tonic or maybe poison. Breakfast, beaver fat, tough roots, and possibly leftover marrow from yesterday. Lunch, grilled deer heart, ash-coated wild boar liver, and water thawed from ice. Dinner, if lucky, fish, if not just mushrooms growing around wild animal dung. No one chooses their food. No one asks, are there vegetarian options? Everything is just calories in calories to survive. Fat is gold. Marrow is a delicacy. Animal tongues are the holiday bonus. There are no multivitamins, no creatine, no strawberry-flavored hydrolyzed collagen, just rocks, dirt and hope. You watch him chew on a piece of black root. He bites down hard rocks. He chews on dirt. That's how they get their trace minerals. No one measures it. Just survive and you get your dose. When you ask, where's the fiber? He tosses you a handful of moss and nods like he's just given you an ancient gift. You chew it and immediately regret it. Neanderthals didn't have dining tables, but they had order. The hunter who kills gets the first serving. The weak get the tendons, the head, or the parts that have been nearly burned. You once thought fairness meant equal sharing, but for them fairness meant share by strength. Liver, the most nutritious part, is for the chief hunter. Marrow sucked out on the spot. Hide used for making fire or boiled soft like chewy limestone candy. You, the stranger, are served last, and your portion is the claw cracked. He nods. Eat it, it's calcium. You look at the animal claw, then back at him. You realize you don't get to choose your portion. He knows which animals have poisonous bile, which plants will make you vomit in 3 minutes, which mushrooms glow and are hallucinogenic, but sometimes help with a cold. You try to eat like him for a day. You vomit after 2 hours. You shiver, sweat cold, staring at your vomit, thinking, maybe my body just doesn't have Ice Age genes. He looks at you chewing silently. You don't know what's in there and you don't want to know. There are traces of ash, burnt wood and charred bones in many archaeological sites from over 50,000 years ago. This means they knew how to roast cook and even slow cook. not to make it pretty on a plate, but to avoid dying from parasites. Marrow was separated. Bones were smashed open to suck out the fat inside. One animal used everything, nothing wasted. There's no concept of eat the lean and leave the fat. When they hunted a big animal, like a bison or a baby mammoth, the whole group would hold an ancient feast. No music, no lights, just fat dripping smoke rising and teeth clashing in happiness. Neanderthals didn't eat quickly. They had rituals, separating the marrow, roasting the fat, dividing the liver. And those who were weak got the lesser portions. Those who hunted got to sit closer to the fire and choose first. You, as the modern guest, are given a block of fat. You bite into it. It's soft like butter, but leaves the feeling of swallowing candle wax cooked with dirt. He looks at you eating, then hands you a broken bone. Inside, still warm marrow. You suck in a breath and faint for a second from the sudden overload of calories. That was the sacred meal. No one laughs, no one talks. There's just chewing, swallowing, and knowing. Tomorrow might not have food. You wake up with the enthusiasm of a wellness TikToker. You announce to him, "I'll eat like you all day." He doesn't say anything. He just hands you a leather pouch with something slimy inside and a fur-covered bone. You start with the root, then the raw liver, then a piece of tough bare fat like a candle. You try to act fine, but by noon you start shaking. By the afternoon you vomit everything from breakfast, along with the last bit of your dignity. He looks at you like you're an alien, then goes back to chewing his meat expressionless. You curl up realizing this isn't a diet, this is survival. Sometimes the salty taste comes from sweat. Sometimes the spicy taste comes from an unidentified root. And sometimes the taste comes from not starving today. Eating like a Neanderthal isn't about getting bigger. It's about not shrinking from the cold, hunger and despair. You learn that when you chew a chunk of dry meat full of tendons, while he nods, as if praising your ability to appreciate it. You don't say anything, because your mouth is numb from the cold, and because you know tomorrow you'll have to lift something heavy, very heavy. You probably heard that Neanderthals had bigger brains than modern humans, and you thought, oh, they must have been really good at geometry or logic. No. They didn't use their brains to prove theorems or write love poems. They used them as a survival GPS that didn't need batteries. Just the smell of blood, the wind direction, and the shape of the sky. And while you're wondering, was he just lucky not to die? Actually, his brain is processing every threat you haven't yet identified. No risk charts, no IQ tests. Just sharp instincts like a stone axe. Something that tells him to stop just in time when a lion is lying in wait behind the bushes. You ask him if he knows about data analysis. He stays silent. But a minute later, he pulls you away from a rock ledge you just heard crack. 3 seconds later, the rock crumbles. You didn't hear anything, but his brain did. By constantly doubting even silence. You ask, how does he remember the way back to the old cave after 2 months of hunting? The answer, he doesn't forget. There's a puddle shaped like a thumbnail, a willow tree that once snapped in the wind, the scratch marks from a bear's claws on a tree trunk. Each of those is a landmark in his memory. No Google Maps. Just survival instincts. They use it to not die. In a world where anything could kill you, falling rocks, wild animals biting cold poisonous mushrooms, strangers. Having a big head means having an emergency processor. Reading footprints in the snow 3 days old. Remembering the path to underground water when the whole group is thirsty. Knowing where to store the marrow so the fox doesn't sniff it out. You ask, do they play chess? He looks at you as if you're some kind of furry food. No chess. They have a memory map and a brain designed to survive. He doesn't speak much, but in his head. He knows exactly when a deer will pass through the valley. He knows which stone is sharper for skinning the animal. He knows which member of the group is weak and may not survive the winter. That's instinctual intelligence. You can't teach it. You can only ingrain it through thousands of Ice Age winters. You've heard the saying, seeing is believing. Neanderthals would laugh quietly at that, because they see more than you ever imagined. Their brain's visual processing area is larger, not for taking selfies, but to read every detail that could save their life. You see the jungle. They see the old path of wild animals. The beehive that broke 2 days ago, and the footprints of something very large that doesn't belong to anyone in the group. You take 5 minutes to get your bearings. They take 2 seconds to know that today you shouldn't be here. Neanderthals had a larger visual processing area in their brain compared to modern humans. This means they saw details, remembered images, and read environmental signals. You see a pile of rocks. He sees dried blood. You hear the wind. He hears the footsteps of an animal sneaking up. In today's world, you use your brain to remember your Wi-Fi password. He uses his brain to remember every slip of deer hooves across a valley 3 years ago. One lives by comfort. The other lives by the ruthless memory of the environment. You see a young Neanderthal drawing on a stone. Not a person, not a god, but a map of the valley, the location of traps, and a drawing of a limbless animal. The one that killed a member of the group. That's education, turning memory into images, a form of cave literature, not beautiful but precise. You realize they didn't lack language. They just didn't waste words, because every word could be the last one. You wonder, with a brain like that, did they think about the future? Yes, but not the dreamy kind of future. Their future was about cold winds hunting and the others who remained. They remember the ones who died. They place bones beneath rocks. They tell the young ones about the man who was killed by a bear when he crossed the river the wrong way. They draw the scene of that man falling using charcoal on the cave wall, not to honor him, but so it won't happen again. The memory of the dead doesn't lie in poetry. It lies in the brains of the survivors, and that memory doesn't exist alone. It lives in the collective brain. A place where the whole group keeps the pieces of events, where one reminds and the other recalls. Some nights they sit around the fire, not telling jokes, but recounting how someone once slipped on a slippery rock. A child asks, "Why didn't he dodge?" The elder answers, "Because he wasn't warned." From then on, that memory doesn't die. It becomes an unwritten rule, a form of communal memory, where survival is everyone's responsibility, not just the victims. They may not have had gods, but they had regrets. And that, perhaps, is why their brains were bigger. To remember, to stay alert, and to never repeat the pain. You realize Neanderthal brains didn't make poetry, but they knew how to stay silent when it was needed. They didn't build houses, but they knew how to get back to the fire. They didn't invent telescopes, but they knew how to read the moon and predict migration seasons. You think fashion started in Milan, The Neanderthals raise an eyebrow. They wore animal fur long before you even knew how to tie your shoes. Early morning, -20 degrees. You step out of the cave. No hoodie, no thermal padding. Nothing but a layer of animal hide sewn with deer sinew. And you immediately realize this is not fashion. This is survival. The outer layer, thick fur to block the wind. The inner layer, soft hide that fits tightly to your skin. And in between, fat. Fat keeps warmth. Fat repels water. Fat smells. You can smell that you're wearing an animal that died just yesterday. And if you find it repulsive, you've already frozen to death. He doesn't care about the smell. He cares if the coat keeps his heart warm. No metal, no scissors. Just a needle made from bird bone. Just thread made from animal sinew. It takes you 3 hours to sew a basic coat. It takes him 30 minutes because he's not sewing. He's surviving. Your hands are trembling. He trembles from hunger. But still, he sews every stitch properly because one misstep means a gap through which the wind can get in. Feet are the fastest way to lose heat. Neanderthals knew this after thousands of winters spent freezing to death. So they invented fat-soled shoes. A layer of animal hide sewn around the foot, a layer of fat soaked into the hide, a layer of ash sprinkled inside to absorb moisture and retain heat. You say, sounds like the worst roast ever. He says, sounds like surviving the winter. Neanderthals didn't wear just one layer. They wore layers strategically for heat retention. First layer, soft hide fitting tightly to keep warm and avoid friction. Second layer, fur with fat to block wind, keep out water. Third layer, sometimes a second hide for extra heat protection or when hunting. Each layer could be quickly removed if you had to run. It could also be wrapped around you if you're about to spend the night in the snow. You think layering is a trend in modern fall fashion. He thinks it's why you're still alive tomorrow. You pick a jacket for color. He picks a jacket for thickness around the chest. You like the style. He likes tight cuffs to prevent dew from creeping in. You match colors. He matches warmth. Fashion to him is a mobile architecture against death. Every piece of hide, every stitch, every layer of fur has a reason for existing. And that reason is to not turn into a frozen chunk of meat. You call it primitive dressing. Not everyone can wear bare hide. Thick, warm, hard to hunt. It's the reward for those who bring down the big game. In the group, you can tell who's the good hunter just by looking at the color of their fur. White fur, hunted in the icy tundra. Brown bear hide, brought down a particularly dangerous animal. Patchwork rabbit skin, hasn't hunted much yet. The strong wear thick hides with few tears. The weak wear patched up coats loose and cold. Fashion back then was a survival hierarchy. No one needed to say it. Those who survived many winters, their bodies told the story. He calls it a soft weapon, not just for warmth. Some hides had spiritual significance. Whoever wore wolf hide was believed to have the soul of the wolf. Intelligent, quick, hard to catch. Bear hide, a symbol of bravery. Whoever wore it was someone who had faced a bear and lived to tell the tale. Some even sewed animal teeth, claws, or ears from their prey onto their coats, not to scare anyone, but to remind everyone that every survival was a victory. The Neanderthal believed wearing the hide of what once killed you was the best way to never forget how dangerous it was. A good hide, sometimes saves the whole group. Neanderthals didn't wear things for beauty. They wore them to disappear from their prey's sight. Fur coats with the rough side facing out, no shine. Earthy browns, cold greys. Camouflage between forests and rocks. No jingling jewelry, because noise missed dinner. Some even smeared their coats with mud, old blood, and damp earth, creating a smell that blended with the surroundings. You call it dirty. He calls it invisible. You don't wash clothes in the Ice Age, because water, freezing. Clothes as brittle as rice paper. Instead, Neanderthals hung their clothes by the fire, smoking them for hours. To kill bacteria, to eliminate the smell of sweat, blood, and animal carcasses. And unintentionally, to ward off predators. The smoky smell keeps many animals away. A burnt, smoky fur coat. No one calls it beautiful, but it's the prehistoric version of deodorant and spiritual armor. You put on an extra jacket. He wears the experience of 1,000 cold winds, and you understand, in the Ice Age, dressing well. Survival. You think Neanderthals only knew how to scream and smash rocks? Well, bow down, deep inside an ancient cave where the firelight dances on the stone walls, and you'll see a painting. Not random, not just scribbles, but a memory. What's painted on the stone? Not flowers, not hearts, but bison, reindeer, saber-toothed cats. It's the human hand palms pressed against the wall, and then powder sprayed around it, as if to say, I was here, I have a shape. No one knows why they painted or what they believed in, but one thing's for sure, they didn't paint to survive. They painted because they had time to dream. You sleep under a warm blanket. They sleep under a cold stone ceiling. Yet they still dreamed. They dreamed of bigger beasts, of successful hunts, of ancestors, those who survived even harsher winters than this one. And to remember that dream, they painted it. Some modern people think Neanderthals probably just painted for fun. But if that were the case, why did they always choose the hardest places to paint? On the ceiling of the cave, having to tilt their necks kneeling, in deep, dark and stifling crevices, on slippery, jagged stone walls far above reach. They brought torches into the caves, mixed pigments and painted layer by layer. And each stroke was deliberate. You call it instinct, I call it the will to not be forgotten. They knew they would die, so they left images where memory doesn't need words. Neanderthals didn't know how to write. No alphabet, no hieroglyphs, no Morse code, but they knew how to tell stories. Each painting on the rock didn't stand alone. Look closely and you'll see a bison falling, a person lifting a spear, a herd of deer running toward the sun. 3 images, 1 story. Not everyone can see it, because they told their stories through a sequence of images, not words. And if you're patient enough, you'll read. This is how my grandfather survived. This is how my mother hunted. This is how I remember them. When there's no language, you use images to hold everything, because a mark on the stone lives longer than a cry in the snow. When you hear the word cave, you probably imagine a temporary shelter, a barren rock ceiling. But for them, it was an exhibition. The Chauvet Cave with its 5-meter high ceiling walls curved like a movie theater. Inside, over 400 paintings. Bison cave lions. Deer moving with the wind. They didn't just paint an animal. They painted movement, speed, and the look in the eyes that told the hunter he was being watched. You step in, and the walls light up under the torchlight. It's like a 3D gallery, only every artist here has been dead for 30,000 years. Did you notice? Most of the paintings are of animals, not by chance, because before they painted they had to observe. Every movement, the way a bear's paw pressed into the snow, how the deer separated before being attacked. Painting wasn't just about preserving. It was training. It was how they learned to attack without shedding blood. It was how the young learned strategy without having to die to try. You think the painting of a big animal was for decoration? No. It was a simulation of tactics, a battlefield map built with smoke-red earth and trembling in fire. And everyone sat around memorizing with their eyes, because the ice and snow don't spare those who learn slowly. Sometimes they didn't paint animals. They painted footprints, a long trail, a smaller footprint. Some say it's the mark of a child. You imagine the scene. A little child, hands covered in dirt, crouching down to draw their mother's footprint. Not to learn, but to remember. Not to express, but to say, Mum was here. They didn't have names. No made by Og the artist. But they left their handprints. A hand pressed against the stone. A circle of red around it. A whisper without sound. I exist. Not to be known, but to not be erased from memory. No acrylics, no paintbrushes. Just charcoal from wood. Dried blood from animals. Red earth mixed with saliva. And sometimes urine. Enough to create a color that wouldn't fade. You find it disgusting. They found it eternal. They painted with their fingers, in the dark, beside the dead relatives, and hoped that someone would see what they once saw. If you stand in the cave alone in the dark, you'll hear the faint sound of burning charcoal, someone blowing powder onto their hand, and silence. A silence that knows how to tell a story. You'll see the hand pressed against the stone, small like yours, but from 40,000 years ago, and you'll whisper, I was here too. You think Neanderthals only hunted beasts and roasted meat. You're wrong. They also fought, but not always with axes or clubs. There were battles with no bloodshed, no roaring, no audience, only heavy breaths in the middle of the winter night, suspicious glances and invisible boundaries on the snow-covered ground. Bones don't lie. There's a skull with a crack, not from an animal bite. It's a round, shallow crack, like it came from a stone thrown with a hand. There's a crooked arm bone, but it healed. That means there was a fight, pain, then continued life together. In the same cave, a stone axe lies near a piece of bone. No courts, no charges, just silence, and the wind howling through the rocks. Not every battle has screams. Some battles are just glances and a piece of animal leg. When they hunt a reindeer, do you think they share equally? No. The strong sit near the fire. The old are pushed to the edge. Children stare at the liver roasting, but must wait. Sometimes wait until only the bones remain. One person secretly hides the fatty skin for their wife. Another sees it, but says nothing. Just that night the fire goes out earlier than usual. There are no arguments, just hungry guts and a very good memory. That's war. The kind where by morning the loser still has to go hunting with the winner. Not everyone raises their voice. Some Neanderthals choose silence, not because they are gentle, but because they are dangerous. Someone gets their share of meat stolen. No reaction. They just look coldly for a long time. That night the sound of footsteps vanishes from the path. No one asks. No one mentions it. Silence sometimes is the final declaration of war, and the one who knows how to use it is the most feared in the cave. Not all Neanderthals were in the same group. There were hunting seasons so poor that one group had to leave, and by accident walked into the territory of another group. No welcoming gates, no permits, just a growl from the other side of the creek, and a look. This is our territory. Broken bones scattered along the path, burn marks on the cave ceiling. Maybe not a battle, maybe just a withdrawal request delivered with a stone axe. You thought sharing fire was intense. Try sharing a blanket in a cave with only 3 animal skins, but with 7 adults and 2 children. No drawing lots, no Excel sheets, only the pretense of falling asleep first, then slowly rolling closer. Someone else accidentally crawls toward you, and so begins the silent tugging of the animal skin. No one speaks, but everyone knows. The cold stings less than being pushed out of the warmth. Each night is a new alliance map. Who lies near who turns their back on who isn't allowed to lie near who anymore. That too is war. Beneath the fur coats is a sophisticated politics. No one wants to be the one to start the fire, especially when the wood is wet, your hands are cold, and the wind is blowing straight into your neck. But someone has to do it. And so, the delicate game of passing the responsibility begins. One person pretends to be carving a spear. Another focuses on stacking unnecessary stones by the cave entrance. A child suddenly needs to go to the bathroom. In the end, the most patient or the quietest will be the one sitting in the smoky haze, fanning the fire that's barely alive from last night. The fire rises. Someone chuckles softly, and so the war quietly drifts away. Not everyone gets to sleep by the fire. Not everyone gets a share of the animal liver. Not everyone gets to decide where to go tomorrow. In every Neanderthal group, there is a ranking system, not by badges, but by scars. Scars on the shoulder cheekbones, on the hands, each one a mark of never running away. Want to climb higher in the rank? You must survive. After looking straight into the eyes of the person next to you, and not lower your head. You think it's easy living together in a small stone cave for 4 months during the winter, when every cough echoes like thunder, when the whimpers of starving children make the adults grit their teeth, when everyone's sleepless, back hurts, and is severely lacking vitamin D. The cold is bearable, the suffocating silence, that's where the war begins. A glance heavier than a stone axe, a sigh that could make someone jump up and walk out of the cave in the middle of a snowstorm. Not everyone is as strong as they appear. Many Neanderthals sigh not because of hunger, but because of memory. They remember lost loved ones. They remember summer. They remember the first time they saw snow, and how they still thought it was beautiful. You survive the cold by muscles, by strategy, by patience. But you only remain human if you don't let yourself freeze from the inside. And that's why they painted. They told stories. They whispered in the night. Not to win over anyone, but to win over their sadness. You see, not every battle is loud. Some battles, there's only one witness, your own breath. They didn't write history. They only lived and left scratches on the stone handprints and silence with weight. That night when the snow falls heavily, you'll understand. Surviving is the greatest victory. When a Neanderthal child cries, there are no lullabies, just a low growl, steady deep, not exactly music, but warmer than any words. Some say it's how they comforted. Others think it's a signal of life. The sound of, "I'm still here," and the child stops crying. Not because they understand, but because they feel held. There's a corner in the cave where the firelight doesn't reach. There is someone who always lies alone. Not because anyone hates them. It's just no one chooses them. Love in the Neanderthal world has no rejections, no drama. It's just that the next morning, someone hunts with someone else. Someone gets to sit by the fire. Someone gets nothing. But that other person stays. They still share the fire, share the meat. And at night they still touch the stone, leaving their handprint like a way of saying, "I was here. I needed someone to choose me." No flutes, no instruments, but in the darkness they tell dreams through gestures, fragmented growls and hands sweeping over the earth. A dream of a white deer, an image of an old cave that has collapsed, a feeling that someone is leaving but still alive. No one objects, no one laughs. Because when you can't write down what you fear, you say it in every other way. Neanderthals didn't keep journals, but their bones tell stories. This person takes care of the other after a broken leg. Not for one day, but for months. No reason other than affection. Because someone injured can't hunt. They can't contribute to the group, but they are still cared for. They loved in the most ancient way, accepting the other's helplessness and not abandoning them. No one recorded their melodies, but the skulls of Neanderthals have structures that help them create deep, resonant tones. They may not have songs, but they had a hum when sitting around the fire. The low growl of the group. That's how they synchronized their heartbeats, keeping the fire alive in their hearts, while outside it's all ice and wind. Neanderthals knew loss. The bones of children are carefully placed, a skull painted with red ochre, as a way of sending them off. They had no religion, but they had rituals. No one hugs and cries like in soap operas. Just people sitting silently, looking up at the cave ceiling, hands holding stones but not carving anything. They were sad, like how snow falls without making a sound. Not everyone gets loved. Not everyone is chosen as a mate. In one group there might be 5 men, 3 women. Some people will be alone, all winter. Not because they're bad. It's just someone looked the other way. Love in the Ice Age isn't romantic. It leans towards survival, but still leaves a very human space, wanting to touch someone's hand, and knowing that hand is also touching back. When the fire goes out and all sounds fade into the snow, that's when secrets are whispered. One person tells a story about a dream. Another mentions the brother who didn't return. No one writes it down. No one repeats it the next day. But in that night, those whispers keep them from vanishing. Not because the sadness is resolved, but because it was heard. No necklaces, no fresh flowers, but there's fresh bone marrow, a bone segment carefully cracked. The marrow is scooped out, wrapped in dry leaves, and quietly placed beside the person who receives it. No one says anything, just a look exchanged, a nod. Then someone turns away as if not making a big deal of it. Affection doesn't need declarations, just survival, and someone remembering to share the best part. They loved, they sang, they cried, not to be recognized, just to hold on to something of themselves. In the frost that covers everything, you think they were an ancient species. No, they were humans with the oldest sadness. There were no farewells, no memorials. It was just One day the handprints on the cave wall stopped. No one knows exactly how the Neanderthals disappeared. There was no grand battle, no catastrophic natural disaster. It was just one small group after another, vanishing like breath in the icy wind. Modern humans arrived, with more fluent language, with more sophisticated tools, with the ability to live in dense populations, in networks. Neanderthals, the stronger, healthier ones. Who knew love? Who knew how to bury the dead? Who knew how to draw on rocks? Were the ones to leave the stage first. No one held a funeral. No one told their story. Only a few strands of DNA, quietly resting in the bones of modern Europeans, like a whisper. They were here. Perhaps somewhere a group of Neanderthals finally saw Homo sapiens for the first time. What did they see? Not monsters, not gods, but a creature with a similar stance to theirs, but moving faster, talking more, staring longer, carrying strange tools made of bonewood tree resin and sound. Neanderthals didn't run. They just stood still, because as always, they didn't judge anyone just by sight. But then, maybe they understood that this was the species that would replace them, not through war, but through numbers. If you were the last of your kind, and you saw others healthy talking, laughing with strange tools, and not looking at you as part of the world, how would you feel? No one kills you, but you no longer belong. You become a stranger in the very place you once ruled. Neanderthals didn't die by sword or spear. They died because no one answered when they called their name. There were no enemies, no extermination orders. Just every winter, their group got a little smaller. A child didn't survive the flu. An elder got lost in the snow. A small group moved caves, never to return. And bit by bit, they became a song no one remembers the words to. A story no one tells anymore. Somewhere on one last night, it happened. The fire crackled. An old person exhaled. A child clutched a piece of warm bone. No one knew. That was the last night the deep song of the Neanderthals was sung. No one added another mark to the cave walls. Only snow filled the mouth of the cave, and time covered everything with a layer of silence. There is a cave in southern France. On it, a red handprint from a Neanderthal. No name, no age. Just a hand, outstretched, pressed to the stone as if to say, I was here. Thousands of years passed. The red faded. The wind wore it down. Water streaked it. But still there it is. A shape, a gesture, and a silent question. Who will remember them when even the stone wears away? In every cell of modern Europeans, there's from 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. They remain not through words, not through speech. They remain in a part of your body, a part of your hearing, an immune response, a wrinkle between your brows when the cold hits. No one knows what those genes carry, but we know for sure. They didn't come from nothing. You might think they lost, but sometimes not being present doesn't mean no longer having an impact. The handprints on the cave walls are still there. The dreams passed from one generation to the next, still etched deeply into the essence of modern humanity. We don't know what they called each other, but when sitting by the fire, when you feel sadness without understanding why, perhaps it is their memory being awakened. You stand in front of the mirror, and if you are European or Asian, you are seeing Neanderthal. Not in the way of, oh no, I look like a caveman, but in the way of, hello, great-grandfather, these shoulders are thanks to you. About 1 to 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal. And not the useless parts like the tiny nail on your pinky finger, but genes that are actively running your immune system, your sound sensitivity, your cold tolerance, and even your tendency to get pimples. A sneeze. Sometimes it's Neanderthal inside you, protecting you from the cold wind. They didn't use weights. They used a 200-kilogram wild deer. They didn't count reps. They counted how many times they dragged an animal carcass back to the cave without getting caught by a pack of wolves. And you, the modern person, are lifting weights in the gym, surrounded by pop music. But the blood pumping into your shoulders, that's ancient craftsmanship. Neanderthals didn't write gym guides, but they left you thigh bones as thick as stone pillars and shoulders as chiseled as limestone. You don't need to hunt mammoths. Just remember, every time you pull a resistance band, there's an ancient gene actively participating. Whether by lighter or gas stove, the fire that makes you feel comfortable is an ancient instinct. Neanderthals used to sit around the fire, not just to roast meat, but to tell stories, to warm their hearts, to keep from going mad from the endless winter. When you look at the fire and feel your heart calm, that's not ASMR effect. It's cellular memory. You were once someone who survived the Ice Age. You startle at a loud noise. You crouch instinctively when a shadow passes by. No one taught you to do that, and you don't remember anyone ever modeling it for you. That's your body's memory, one that learned survival from 40,000 years ago and doesn't need firmware updates. Just like how you fear snakes, fear the dark, fear places that are too quiet. That's the Neanderthal part of you staying alert. And strangely enough, and it's still accurate, when you walk past an ancient ruin and your heart tightens a little, when you step into a cave and can't help but whisper because of the sacred stillness, when you hold a round stone in your hand and feel it's both beautiful and sad, though no one speaks. That's the wordless language your ancestors left behind, not through writing, but through emotion, atmosphere, and profound silence. When you bow your head before a lost loved one, when you place your hand on cold stone and feel something very old, when you dream a dream you can't name, but in it someone who doesn't quite look like you stands in the mist. That's not imagination. That's their handprint, alive again through emotion. Neanderthals didn't write history. They became a part of you, in the quietest but most enduring way. You don't need six-pack abs to make your ancestors proud. You just need to think of them. When the cold wind touches the back of your neck, when your skin prickles from an ancient story, or when you feel you're not just the present. Maybe you once thought Neanderthals were a failed branch, but if failure still leaves strength in your genes, emotion in your blood, and memories in your sleep, then maybe they never left. They didn't have medals, no names in textbooks, no memorial days. But if they didn't exist, you wouldn't be standing here breathing, thinking, dreaming, and knowing how to laugh. No one knows their names. No one carved their faces into stone statues. No one recorded any specific stories about them. But every muscle in your arm, every reflex when you step back to avoid a car, every tear when you see someone in pain, are all things they left behind. You don't need to build a Neanderthal statue in a park. You just need to not forget them. Don't mock them in cartoons. Don't call them the failed version. Don't laugh when someone says something silly and you blurt out, "What a Neanderthal." Because sometimes the quietest person is the first one to defend you, and the one who's no longer here is the reason you're still alive. You don't need to build a monument. You just need to say their name, even if it's in your heart. You may not know their names, not remember where they lived, not recall any of their words. But when you whisper, "Thank you for surviving," you've already called them back. No incense, no tombstones, just one word of remembrance. The memory of ancestors doesn't need applause. It just needs you to close your eyes and whisper in your heart, "I'm still here, and I remember." You don't need to be as strong as they were. You just need to keep their moment from disappearing completely. A glance, a story retold, a moment standing still against the cold wind, an understanding. Someone once stood here before you, in the freezing cold, and didn't retreat. And if they didn't completely disappear, then you're never truly alone. The end is not about loss. It's about passing the torch. And now, it's your turn to keep the fire alive. Yes, many ups and downs. Do you think you could survive in the Ice Age again? Let me know in the comments below, or tell me where we should go next. Your suggestions could become a future episode of Deblocked. Are you curious if you could survive in ancient Egypt, Greece, or other ancient times? Check out this video. There are many more dangers people had to face. Oddly enough, many of those dangers came from something that, in a lot of ways, allowed life to flourish. As always, my name is Blocko. This has been Life Noggin. Don't forget to keep on thinking. The city of Pompeii was buried alive. Pompeii was an ancient Roman city buried by volcanic ash. Now the ruins are located in the Campania region of Italy, within the municipality of Pompeii near the city of Naples. Pompeii, along with its sister city Herculaneum, was completely destroyed and buried by a 2-day eruption of Mount Vesuvius. In the year 79 after Christ, Pompeii was buried under 18 meters of ash and pumice. The ruins were forgotten for the next 1700 years until they were unexpectedly discovered in the year 1748. You're standing in the middle of a bustling market, the sound of crispy bread being torn in the vendor's hands, the shouting of a master scolding a slave for being late, the buzz of cicadas under the ripe grapevines and someone whistling, an old tune from the theatre the day before. A child jumps over a puddle. A woman tries on a fake gold bracelet. A merchant walks briskly toward a tavern, with suggestive paintings hanging outside. They all think that tomorrow they'll keep living just like today. No one knows this is their last day. No announcements, no countdowns. Just a mountain standing there as it always has. Silent, immense, seemingly motionless. Vesuvius. A name never whispered with fear. They called it the Big Hill, the Garden of the Gods. They believed the fire had died in its heart hundreds of years ago. And then, as with every tragedy, it woke up. In less than 24 hours, all of Pompeii would be buried alive, not by rocks, not by bombs, but by ash so hot it would vaporize the soul itself. But the worst part wasn't the destruction. It was how these people were trapped, at the exact moment they were living. A sudden freeze, when you're asleep, when you're running, when you're holding someone. Pompeii wasn't just destroyed, it was frozen. In the final posture of life. Imagine a city where every pleasure is allowed, as long as you can afford it. Pompeii wasn't just a coastal vacation spot. It was where the rich came to indulge, where nobles rented villas with gardens, fish ponds, walls painted with erotic scenes, and where slaves scrubbed the house, using volcanic ash from past eruptions. There were taverns where you could drink and choose someone to sleep with. The pictures and prices carved right on the walls. There were legal brothels with the names of regular clients carved into the stone beds. There were graffiti paintings with curses and ads for massage services scrawled behind the latrines. Pompeii didn't hide its pleasures. It flaunted them as a symbol of civilization's achievement. Here, there were public baths, where men, women, and philosophers bathed together and chatted. There were theaters, markets, gyms, and over 80 ancient fast food joints, thermopolium. They served bread stews and honey wine. If you were a visitor from Rome, you'd feel like you were in a Roman version of Las Vegas. If you were a slave, you'd feel like you lived in a factory of pleasure. Beauty and filled poetry and the mundane stood side by side, and no one saw any contradiction. The people lived by the belief, if the gods let us indulge, then they approve. No one feared the mountain in the distance. It was just the backdrop for murals. No one thought they were living right above a sleeping monster. And when you don't think about danger, you live, but you aren't prepared to die. The homes were framed in comfort, and death sat in the corner. The streets were like a map of habits. If anything reflected daily life in Pompeii, it was the very street, the paved roads with deep wheel ruts. Like the chariots had been following the same path all year long, white chalk lines marking the center of the road, worn-out spots in front of eateries, animal tracks mixed with sewage. These were all marks of routine. You could know who always sat at the corner of the baths, who always ordered the stewed beans at stall number 14, and who had fought outside tavern 22, because there were old bloodstains turned brown on the stone. This city didn't just live, it left its marks, marks of feet, of wheels, of tears and spilled wine, then frozen in time. And that's the real tragedy. Pompeii didn't have a chance to change its habits. The last day came when everything was still repeating, just like the day before. The rich in Pompeii lived in villas with atriums, peristyles and frescoes of Bacchus, pouring wine for a beautiful sleeping woman. Mosaic floors with jumping fish patterns, lofty ceilings, marble benches covered with animal skins. A small shrine, called a lararium, stood near the entrance, dedicated to ancestors and guardian gods, still with dried wine stains on the offering plate. In another corner was the slave's bedroom, just a wall nook with a thin blanket and a bucket for nighttime use. In the same house, luxury and shame were separated by just one wall. When archaeologists walked into these homes, they didn't just see life again. They saw preparations for a banquet, interrupted halfway. They saw the bread left uneaten, the sandals left behind, the ring dropped in the middle of running away. Living space turned into a graveyard. Pompeii didn't have social media, but they had walls, and walls know how to speak. They know how to laugh, they know how to mock, and even how to tell secrets. More than 11,000 inscriptions have been found on the walls of Pompeii, from the city gates to the public baths. Some were simple notes like, "Secundus was here and he's awesome." Others were like ancient rap, "I hate Marcus's bread," like kissing a dead fish. Some wrote love poems, "If you don't return, I'll die. But if you return, I'll die even faster." Some were complaints. "Damn it, I drank too much here last night. Whoever finds me, please take me back to my wife's house." And in the brothels, graffiti was the menu. Julia, good with her mouth. Felix, strong hands. Quintus, likes to listen. Flexible prices. Graffiti wasn't just playful banter. It was a living diary. It was where ordinary people wrote what they didn't dare say aloud. Love, desire, envy, and hunger. And ironically, in the midst of their bodies being consumed by hot ash, their words remained intact. Pompeii wasn't just frozen by volcanic ash. It was also pinned down by words that no one expected would become immortal. Pompeii had everything that people considered civilization: a clean water system, led by lead pipes, public baths, with steam rooms, cold rooms, warm rooms, a mini arena, fast food joints, bread-making techniques, fish sauce production skills, and an increasingly confident middle class. It was like a modern-day vacation resort by the coast. People ate well, swore slept with strangers, walked their dogs and bought furniture for their newly built bathrooms. No one thought about tomorrow. No one needed to think. They lived as if progress meant when death was kept out. But death doesn't need to knock. It floats in the air. It flows in the hot water pipes. It sits in the theatre seats, waiting for its turn. The collapse. On the 24th of August, in the year 79 after Christ, early morning, clear skies, a light breeze, housewives are starting the fire, children are playing in the yard, a group of men is gambling by the corner tavern, and then a bang, not loud, but enough to make everything stop for 2 breaths. Mount Vesuvius doesn't erupt like in a Hollywood film. It doesn't spew fire. It doesn't roar. It cracks open and begins releasing a column of black smoke taller than a dozen trees. Ash falls like snow, but it's hot snow, tiny particles as sharp as glass, falling onto hair, eyes, and skin, burning before anyone even realizes what's happening. People scream. Some run home. Others run for the city gates. But where to run? When the sun has vanished behind the smoke, when you no longer know east from west, north from south. A man clutches his child. A woman covers her face. A group hides in the wine cellar. A slave is sweeping the yard frozen in place, the broom still in hand. A young woman washing her hair outside tilts her head back to watch the ash fall, mistaking it for strange rain. A teacher, panicked, runs to the school, calling out for each student by name, but the classroom is empty. These personal stories, never written down in words, but they live on in the fallen frames and the hardened ash on the stone floors. Some people carry money, some carry dogs, some only manage to carry themselves. The ash piles up hour by hour. Roofs collapse, trees smolder. People suffocate from the fumes. Before they even realize they're being burned from the inside out, if you could watch each hour pass. This is how death creeps in. like a script written in advance. 8 in the morning, a sunny day. No one knows what's coming. Some spot a small column of smoke, thinking it's just a northern storm. 10 in the morning, ash begins to fall, light as chalk dust. People wave it away, still laughing. A few hours later, no one can see the road anymore. 1 in the afternoon, hailstones start to fall heavily. Roofs begin to crack. Some hide in grain storage, not realizing it's where the toxic air will collect first. 5 in the afternoon, the sky is as black as ink. The ground trembles slightly in waves. No one speaks anymore, only coughing and solitary cries. 7:30 at night, the first surge of the pyroclastic flow. No warning, no sirens, just a hot wind sweeping by, turning everything to ash in a matter of seconds. Each hour that passes is another layer of memory buried under the earth. And no one thought that death could be so punctual. And then, after nearly a full day of chaos, the worst part arrives. The pyroclastic surge. Superheated air moving at speeds over 100 kilometers per hour, with temperatures above 400 degrees Celsius, rushing down into the city like a flying monster. No one survives that surge. They never even had the chance to feel pain. They only had time to huddle together, or hold someone, or raise their hand. As if they could stop death itself, they turned to stone in the very last pose of life. Many of these positions are found not only as scientific evidence, but as unfinished stories of humanity. A man kneels, reaching out in front of him as if pushing his child further away from the heat. A young woman lies on her side, hand covering her face, trying to hold on to the last rays of light. A group of 3 people huddle together tightly, their heads bent close, as if sharing breath, in their final moments. There's even a person clutching a key, maybe to return home, maybe to ensure no one else takes it. Or maybe simply, the only thing left in their hand. These postures were not created by art. They were born of helplessness, urgency, and something that looks like love. They didn't know that the moment they were in would become eternal. Let me know if you need anything else. There is no sculpture in the history of humankind like the ones found in Pompeii, unlike the statues of Greek gods, beautiful, symmetrical, and idealized. Unlike the Roman statues of Caesar, noble, cold, and majestic, the statues here are real people, with ash in their hair, wrinkles on their foreheads, and fingers still curled in fear. If classical art is the beauty of arrangement, then Pompeii is the rawness of a moment that no one orchestrated. That's why these statues reach deeper into the viewer, because you're not facing a legend. You're seeing a person who could have been you. No need for an artist. No need for decorations. No need for imagination. Just one moment, and the ash turned a person into a statue. These postures, they don't lie on a stage. They're not in a painting. They're on the floor, in the corner of the kitchen, outside the doorstep. A man slumps by the window ledge, reaching outside as if hoping to escape. Just one more second. A girl clutches her chest, head bowed between her knees, as if trying to withdraw from the whole world. A mother kneels beside her child, hand shielding its head as though offering the last shelter in the world. No one told them to stand like this. No one arranged them into these poses. And perhaps no one expected that their death posture would reveal so much about how they lived. In the 19th century, archaeologists discovered something strange. The hardened ash, as solid as cement, was hollow inside. And so they pumped plaster into it. The result, hundreds of human statues emerged, with expressions, bodies, even creases in their clothing. So eerily real, it's unsettling. You don't need imagination. You just need to stand there, look at them, and you'll witness a moment frozen in time. This is where death doesn't take life. It just preserves it. In 1863, an archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli tried something no one had done before. He poured liquid plaster into the hollow spaces within the ash. These hollow spaces were actually the voids left behind by the decomposing human body. And when the plaster hardened, he removed the ash and found a human, with expression, with clothing, with wrinkles on their forehead. From then on, hundreds of human statues were reborn, not from imagination, but from true death. Today, this technique has been enhanced with 3D printing and laser scanning. Researchers can now determine broken postures, wounds, signs of inhaled toxic gases, and even the deep bite marks in the mouth of a small child. The ash of Pompeii is not just dust, it is a slow-motion film of an apocalypse. And science is the most patient storyteller for those who no longer have a voice. You don't need to know their names. You don't know what they did for a living, what food they liked, which gods they believed in. But when you look at them, you cry, not because they are special, but because they are so much like you. A hand that is holding, an eye that is still shut, a mouth that is open as if to say something final, but will never finish. There is no graveyard where the dead speak so clearly. There is no statue so alive that it makes you ask, if tomorrow comes like this, what posture will I be caught in? And in those lying, kneeling postures, there is something else that is also preserved, what they carried with them. One person clutches a key. Another holds a bronze necklace. Some even hold a water jug. A child was found clutching the bones of a small dog. No one tells us why they chose these things. There was no survey when the ash fell. We can only guess that in their final moment, people carried whatever made them feel still human. A ring, a name, a memory, and that's why over 2,000 years later, we still look at them and see ourselves. Let me know if you need anything else. When the ash covered Pompeii, every sound went silent. But the strange thing is, the ash didn't just kill, it preserved. Hundreds of objects were turned to charcoal without being destroyed. A loaf of blackened bread, still keeping its round shape. Walnuts, still in their shells. A toppled wooden table. A couch beside the fireplace. Roman spice jars still retained their scent. When opened, a smell that might have been someone's last dinner. A rusty knife, the unfinished cut on a sausage, still intact. Not temples, not bronze statues. It's these little things that make history feel truly close. No one survived to tell the last meal of Pompeii, but luckily, the pod is still there. There is no one to tell the story. Only stones, bones, and unexpected things that still remain. A loaf of blackened bread, an unfinished graffiti, and not just one. Pompeii is a treasure trove of more than 11,000 pieces of graffiti, ranging from declarations of love, vulgar jokes, to even a slave's time card. One person wrote, "I ate here and didn't pay." Another wrote on a toilet wall, "Marcellus is a traitor." There are unfinished love poems, as if the writer had to flee in the middle. No final words echoed in the ash, but those scrawled lines are the last words left. Not epics, not heroic poetry, but the whispers, complaints and love of a city that was alive. A child's potty still holds urine. A dog chained to a door, dead in a contorted position. There are footprints, many footprints, imprinted in the unfired clay. Children's footprints, running around the kitchen. Adult footprints, stopping at the doorway. Footprints of a donkey, pulling a cart, even showing the marks from sliding. We also found animal bones, from rats, cats to even pigeons covered by ash in their nests. No species was warned, and the ash didn't choose who to spare. History isn't only left in books. It also exists in what psychologists call frozen memory, an unconscious form of collective memory. When you see that child's potty, those broken footprints, or a loaf of burned bread, you don't just see an ancient object, you see yourself. If you lived in the year 79 after Christ, Pompeii reminds us that history isn't a series of events, but a series of human moments interrupted. Not everyone is an emperor or a warrior, but anyone could be the person who didn't lock the door when the sky turned ash grey. It's also in every broken fingernail, every scratch on the wall, every shattered tile with a footprint pressed into it. And it's in these small things that modern humans, for the first time, see the apocalypse. In high resolution, when the city disappears, but every detail still whispers. You can walk into a Roman tavern, still with scorch marks on the counter. You can see a house where the mosaic floor is shattered, exactly where the woman's body fell. You can read a vulgar poem, etched on a public restroom wall, and laugh, even knowing the writer may have died right after. Pompeii isn't just ruins, it's a moment locked in time, a snapshot protected by ash and time. If Rome is a symbol of victory and grandeur, then Pompeii is a tearful whisper about what was lost. And the excavations, they don't just dig up earth, they dig up memories. Modern excavations continue, and every year Pompeii tells another piece of the story. In 2018, in the Regio 5 area, 2 skeletons were found lying together. 2 men holding each other tightly in the flow of ash. Perhaps best friends, lovers, or just 2 strangers afraid together. In 2021, archaeologists discovered a slave room with 3 wooden beds, a chamber pot, and the imprint of a wooden cartwheel, still visible on the floor. No one knows their names, but now the whole world knows they once existed. Not just objects, not just events. Each discovery is a reminder history is still alive, and sometimes it knows how to wait. When modern archaeologists step into Pompeii, they don't just search for artifacts. They step into a city still half alive, a city where everything was paused, in the middle of a sigh, a pot of stew not yet stirred, a footprint stopping at the door, a wooden door smashed from the inside, the hinges bent, the wood broken into pieces. Perhaps someone tried to escape, or tried to open the door to bring someone in. We will never know who they were, only the broken frame and the faint blood stain on the stone floor. Panic is imprinted on everything, from the broken doorknob to the nail scratches on the wall. A knife lies next to a half-eaten piece of bread. Each layer of earth being peeled back is a story being revealed. No need for imagination, no need for mythology. Just look, and you know, they're no different from us. Let me know if you need any further adjustments. They have no names, no gravestones, no biographies to read on Wikipedia. But we have something else, the way they were preserved. In 1863, the archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli realized that in the hardened ash, the empty spaces were where human bodies once lay. He poured plaster into them, and for the first time in history, the victims of Pompeii were revealed in their entirety. In death, every fold of fabric, every curled finger, every mouth half open, unable to speak, all appeared as if time had just stopped. Death was no longer an abstract concept. It had form, it had gestures, it had faces, and now it had people looking at it. Above all, some of them have been identified again, thanks to modern DNA analysis. Scientists have determined the gender, the age, and sometimes even the geographic origins of some bodies. A 16-year-old teenager originating from North Africa, a middle-aged woman showing signs of malnutrition from childhood, likely a slave. Pompeii was not just a city of Romans, it was a place for migrants, for slaves, for Greek merchants, and even the nameless from the East. Before all those postures, there was one image that moved the world. Two people holding each other in the ashes. At first, they were called the lovers. Lovers frozen in their last embrace. It wasn't until bone analysis that they discovered these were two men. They could have been brothers, best friends, or as initially thought, lovers. That embrace transcended all labels, and Pompeii, by chance, became the keeper of one of the most poignant moments of human emotion. No explanation needed, but they have their posture, their last gaze, and the ash kept everything. From the frantic embrace to the screams stuck in their mouths. These ash statues are not sculptures. They are the molds of a human moment betrayed by time. A woman holding her child slumped as if shielding it. A man lying on his side, hand raised, as if warding off a wave. A dog curled up as though still trying to untangle itself from an invisible leash. We stand there looking at them, not out of pity, but to realize if it were us, we would have remained there just like that. No civilization is immortal, no laughter lasts forever, but some final breaths still echo after nearly 2 millennia. Pompeii didn't die. It just whispers, under the ash, waiting for someone to listen.